Hello, and welcome to the Content Advantage, a talk show about content for folks like you, content professionals. I'm Scott Abel, the content wrangler, and with me today is my co-host, Megan Gilhooly.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm great, Megan. How are you today?
Good to see you. So today we're talking about semantics, which we know means the study of meaning. And semantic content is content that's written and structured in ways that reinforce the meaning of content. And it makes it understandable to both humans and computers. Semantic markup, of course, enables us to deliver content at scale. But today we're specifically going to talk about how it also helps us improve the experiences that our customers have with our content.
Excellent.
And so to help us dive into this subject, we've invited the king of semantics, Cruce Saunders, one of my favorite people,
Welcome,
founder of content intelligence consultancy called A. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Megan. Thank you, Scott. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Great to see you. All right. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's stuff, can you just kind of tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your connection to the subject?
Sure. Well, just a capsule. I've been involved with content for a very, very long time. Back in 1994, I started an internet consultancy and then created a CMS at one point, and then became an integrator, and then started realizing that content is poorly managed through its whole life cycle, and that really that needed systemic and pattern-based solutions. So I created A as a way to help really understand the bigger picture patterns that underpin all content. And really what I came out to was structure and semantics are really the most important patterns for organizations to manage. And they appear in all content. So semantics is really talking about one entire pillar of our approach at A. We've been working with some of the largest enterprise publishers on the planet, and we've been doing everything from niche kind of projects to help facilitate content supply chain integration to entire transformations associated with building, managing, and delivering content across multiple groups. And so it's given us an insight into what's going well and where the problems are across enterprise content.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That's one of the many reasons that we invited you to join us today, because of your expertise. And speaking of expertise, let me help the new folks who are joining us today become little experts themselves at using the BrightTalk system that we're using to display our webinars today. Today's show is being recorded, which means that you can use the same URL that you're using to watch the live show to watch a recording. About a half an hour after today's show ends, the recording will be made available automatically. You can return back and watch that on demand or share it with other people, and we hope that you will. Also, don't worry about your camera or your microphone. We can't see or hear you, so there's nothing creepy going on there. You don't have to worry about whether or not you've got cats or dogs in the background or children that are visiting you. We won't be able to tell. You can ask a question at any time using the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. That allows you to text us a question into a little queue that I'll monitor. I won't be able to text you back or answer a question, but I'll know that you asked a question, and we'll try to serve up as many to Cruce as possible with the time that we have remaining in the show. Also, you can access additional content. Cruce himself and the company A have provided some resources in the attachments and links section of your webinar viewing panel. There's also some information from our sponsor, Zoom In Software. So don't forget to check that out. And if you got any help that you need using the BrightTalk system, if you have some audio or video challenges, there's also some troubleshooting information in the attachments section to help you smooth out those challenges. Also, I'll remind you at the end of the show, I'll ask you to give us a rating of 1 through 5 stars. That rating is based on the quality of the information provided by Cruce today. And there's a little field that you can share the reason that you gave the rating that you did, or just to make a comment that you can share with Cruce. I know that he'd appreciate it if you did. So don't forget to do that. All right, Megan, let's get this show on the road.
I love it. Cruce is already pandering for a 5. Very good. Thank you for doing that, Scott. Appreciate that. So let's talk about semantics. Now, we kind of know semantics is one of those words where, depending on your background and where you're at, it has different meanings. So let's talk about a really good definition. How do you, Cruce, define semantics? And specifically, how do you use this term in content development?
Yeah, well, you're right. If you ask anybody from a college university professor to a developer working with markup languages to a librarian to a knowledge graph architect, all of them are going to give you a slightly different answer a different definition for semantics, and really they'd all be right, because semantics, as you said at the opening, is the study of meaning. But how we apply it, right? How do we apply that meaning? That really depends on the context. So for our purposes, we're going to talk about the use of semantics across knowledge sets and the expression of that knowledge in content form. And so when we're dealing with meaning and classification at multiple levels, it can be done at the word level, the document, modular component. At all these different scales, we can apply semantics. And it's really the use of that application of classification that really becomes very useful.
So why should busy organizations who have tons of things to do nowadays prioritize and devote their scarce resources to the development of semantics, I guess, or the valuable capabilities that it gives us? What problems would semantic content help us solve?
Well, semantics ultimately connects content with customers, but also with authors that need it at a given time. So it's about connection and recommendation. It's about relevance. So all content professionals already are working with semantics, whether they're conscious of it or not.
Okay.
So every time we work with words, any word we say, that has a semantic meaning. And so can we make that explicit and then connect that meaning into the systems of management and delivery?
Got it.
So it's really, semantics is ultimately how our content gets understood and used by humans and machines.
When humans are doing it, we have nonverbal communication and other cues to provide context of location, where we're at when we say it, the tone of voice that we use expresses other things. And what you're saying is we have to equip our content with those cues so machines can also understand what we intend, not just other people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because machines are very literal, and when we're doing keyword searches or we're doing auto-generated tagging, we end up with high error rates that are usually derived from the fact that machines really today have a hard time understanding content. And it's my general position that that machines rather in the future will continue to have a hard time understanding content until explicit sets of semantics accompany the content sets. So skipping way, way, way ahead, I see a future in which all content ends up in some sort of graph form, and all semantics also end up in a graph form, and that all customer data, whether it's personally owned or owned within the session that the company is facilitating with that customer, is also graphed. And those graph interactions create the ability to generate intentional, intelligent customer experiences. That is, context-rich customer experiences full of meaning that at their base are semantic meaning. And I believe that we have to build a whole semantic layer to our content to get to that future. That it's not going to happen on its own. There is no magic AI that's going to come along and automatically tag our content and make it rich and relevant. That we need to apply human effort to be able to get to that intelligent customer experience future. So I do believe that machines are very, very good at connecting meaning and customer experience when they have provided semantics.
Excellent. So just for our audience members who wonder, what happened to Megan? She was there just a second ago. Apparently Megan's experienced an internet glitch and she's trying to dial back in right now. We'll see if she's successful. In the interim, Cruce, I will tackle Megan's question. Her next question for you was, what does this look like in practice? Could you share some kind of example to help the audience understand?
Yeah. So one that a lot of people already are familiar with are UTM IDs in the in your query string of your browser. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, the long, extra long URL with all the extra information to do what? We're not sure.
Right, exactly. So the machine is using that, and often those are sort of semantic, right? It'll have like origin equals and then kind of where it came from, and then action equals or stage, or it could be customer ID, or it could be any other kind of information that's providing meaning to the computer, allowing it to basically associate that query to a URL with that semantic term. And it's very explicit, right? It's the query string contains all that information, whether it's in numbers or in words, in the browser string. So what's happening on the back end of that is then getting associated with a lot of different things, like attribution analytics and also content targeting and personalization. So if I come in with interest equals healthcare, then I might be presented with an offer that is geared towards healthcare. And if that query string contains that semantic identifier, then the resulting content that comes back at me could be matched with that. So that's a really blunt use of semantics that a lot of folks are familiar with. So once we get more fine grain, we actually want to be able to take that content and down to the offer level, or the very small micro content, the modular content pieces that are also associated with those same tags. And the trick is that we have to figure out how to get those semantics applied to the content from the first moment it's born. That's the thing we work on with content supply chain work, is we have to help the authors, even before something gets to authoring, have semantic value associated with what they're doing. And the way that we do that is with some kind of creative brief, or campaign brief, or content brief, or some sort of strategic document. And that allows us to essentially associate what this content is for. Who are the audiences? What is it meant to do? What is the audience intent? Sure. And kind of do that at kind of like a document level, or at an item level, whether that's an individual offer or an event or whatever it is that's being authored. It can collect semantics in the authoring state, and then we have to pass those semantics on to management and then into delivery.
So let me say welcome back, Megan, who was knocked off.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
Hey, no.
I jumped in and I asked your question, which was, what does this look like in practice? And before Cruce finishes this particular section of our chat, there was a reference to Cruce making a connection to your platform Zoom-In. So I want to change up our order just real slightly a little bit and say, Megan, this might be a good time for you to say what Zoom-In software does, and then we can ask Cruce a question about how Zoom-In could facilitate this semantic matching.
Yes, absolutely. So most companies make it really, really hard for customers to find the answers they need. And a lot of times it has to do with semantics. But our platform ingests technical product content from any source, structured, unstructured. It doesn't matter how it was created or published. We deliver it rich in semantics into a documentation portal, into a community, into a customer service site, and even into the product itself. And in this way, customers are able to self-serve more efficiently, and organizations can reduce support costs and improve product adoption, and overall improve their customer experience.
Excellent, excellent. So, Cruce, how might semantics come into play with a system like this that helps serve up the relevant content? Is that what powers all of this? The taxonomy and the semantics, the tags, and all the extra metadata?
Well, yeah, and we believe in decoupling semantics from systems. And what's great about Zoom-In is through the API, it can participate in a content supply chain. We can basically provide semantic annotations to the content in multiple ways, right? And so what we always look for when we're putting together content supply chains is, how does the system work with decoupled semantics? In most of our clients, what we're doing is we're building a semantic layer. So we're identifying the meaning of the terms and then the intent of the customers. And we're putting all of that along with a lot of other information. Product metadata, for example, gets to be very, very significant semantic content. So all of that goes into a semantic system, and then we provide that to authoring, and then we provide that to the systems of customer experience and delivery, like Zoom-in. And Zoom-in has a really, really good API for managing those kind of interactions. There is, with we try to take an agnostic standpoint where the organization needs to manage its own semantics independently of systems. Where people get trapped up, and it happens all the time, all day long, is they associate the semantics with their system. And it gets tied in there.
Right. And that does that make it difficult to detangle later when you need to do something unexpected that when you created this tangling and this interweaving you didn't anticipate?
Well, yeah. So it helps with fluidity, but it also helps with just the fact that there's diversity of use. So content has to do a lot of things in a lot of places. And one of the places it has to do work is in authoring. And authoring is very often decoupled from the management. So, but they need semantics in both places. We need semantics in the authoring, and we need semantics in the management and delivery. So what having a semantic layer allows us to do is provide those semantics from one common source. So we don't have to maintain a spreadsheet. And whose spreadsheet? Oh, that's on Nancy's computer. I think it's in her shared drive. Did you look in drive S? Yes, it's okay. And then nobody references. So they put together the interface. Why didn't the UX developers, make a semantic query for all of these offers that are being presented? Well, they didn't know. So it's like, if you have a centralized source of semantics, it becomes something that can be communicated to all the collaborators that create customer experiences, because customer experiences are never created in one place.
Right.
It's always a team effort.
Megan, do you have
I liken it to the principle of garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you have no semantic centralization and you try and force your stuff into any tool, Zoom-in or any other tool, right? You're going to end up with something that's not the ideal customer experience. We, of course, take your semantics and use that to enrich the customer experience. So the better your semantics, the better the customer experience. I always find it ironic that the phrase, when we say, oh, it's just, you're just talking semantics now, because that kind of implies that you're talking about words without meaning, when in reality, semantics really is the meaning of the words, right? And so that's really important. And one of the stories that I often tell is about my daughter, who has some pretty significant cognitive delays, and she'll talk to Alexa and she'll say, Alexa, how do I make a princess dress? And Alexa takes it very literally and starts to talk about sewing patterns and things that my daughter is just like, I don't know what you're talking about. What she really wanted to say is, how do princess dresses get made and how do they sort of appear in the world? And if Alexa had the context or the meaning behind her words, then she would give a completely different answer.
And you made mine start talking, so I have to remember to tell everyone before the show starts to turn your electronics.
Oh, sorry, I said the word. I shouldn't have said her word.
Spell like you can do Alexa or you know who.
Yes.
Hey, Cruce, you talked a lot in the past about something called the master content model. Can you remind us of what this is and how it links to the core semantic model?
Yeah. So, yes. So we're building, semantic models for organizations that need to be cross-functional. So ideally, we start out with one knowledge domain in one department, and we build a semantic model to support the customer experiences there.
Sure.
And the interactions. But then that has to become, all knowledge touches other knowledge. So that has to become shared.
Sure.
And extended and then mapped into the source of terms. And other times there's controlled vocabularies. And there's other forms of semantics within the localization teams.
Right.
And even small teams, they'll have surprising numbers of sources of semantics. So what we do when we're creating a core semantic model is kind of identify all those sources and resolve them, reconcile them, get them into a single system of record. And then, the content model that we've talked about for a long time is the structural equivalent of that, the master content model, we are renaming that, rebranding that now. The new trademark application is even in, but it's yeah, for the core content model, because we got some great feedback, in fact, from an alumni at A who pointed out that the word master has been misused, and that's very semantic challenge, right? Yeah. There's all kinds of associations, semantic associations with the word master that are unintended. Yeah. And so we basically want to decouple and change our semantics around that. We're calling it the core semantic model and the core content model. And those two things work together. And basically the structural model is how it's the interoperating set of internal standards for how content is shaped. So what containers it goes into, and really how those containers relate. For example, the title in a newsletter versus the title in an email, right, can those be the same thing? And so there's relationships between those structural containers. And then there's semantics, and the semantics have to work with the containers. So we have to be able to reference semantics within our definition of the core content model. So the core content model, for example, what might have an audience conversation. So what conversation is this advancing within this audience group, within a market segment, which is another form of intent. And that conversation might need to be mapped to a field within the content model that deals with basically identifying this item and where and which audience it needs to apply to.
That's the main point of the core semantic model is kind of the explicitness, the being able to point to something and saying, when we want to say this, this is what we want to happen. We want these words and this content to be displayed. So what is the point of the core semantic model? I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's basically making sure that the right content pieces get to the right people. Yeah. And so it's associating the content to the use. There's a lot of other ways that semantics can be used, but content to use or content to context is really the most important for intelligent customer experiences. And that's really how semantics unlocks intelligent customer experiences, is when we can get that content at the modular level to have semantics with it that agree with the semantics of the delivery environment, right? So that, and that recommendation, so that basically what we're doing is kind of like Netflix for content all the time. We have to create a recommendation you might like, right? Yeah. But it's based on, you're on step 4 out of 5 of a process. I'm not going to take you back to step 1. I'm going to give you step 4. So knowledge management teams use it to make customers happier, because instead of the customer being like, I've told them 5 times, I've called in the call center and every time I have to re-explain my problem. Like we can contextualize using semantics the answers to the situation. Same thing with text in the field with but like, and this is starting to happen. I've seen it with heads-up displays and AR, where based on the context of where you are, it's identifying what is the right fix that the technician can bring into the field in the service environment. So it's using semantics to make that connection. So it's everything from you might like this article on a website to real-time AR-based field technician support, or real-time customer interaction in the operating system, or real-time interaction with anybody. We all need to get the semantics together.
Great. Before Megan asks you the follow-up question, I wanted to remind our audience members who may have joined us a little bit late in the show, thank you for joining us. You can ask a question of Cruce at any time by using the Ask Questions tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Just click that button and send a little text over to us. We won't be able to text you back, but we'll be able to answer as many questions as possible with the time remaining. All right, go ahead. Take it away, Megan, and let's finish this show out.
Sure. So first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate the fact that you took time to think about the semantic meaning of the word master in light of everything that happened in 2020. I just think that's wonderful that you actually took that to heart and did something with it. So kudos to you on that. But what I want to ask you is, who in a company, and if you think about a large enterprise, who's in charge of this semantic model? Is it the authoring teams? Are they the ones that are maintaining it? Does it fit into sort of a larger publishing flow that maybe has to be centralized? How does that play out in large enterprises typically?
Yeah, well, it really requires two things. One is there needs to be some kind of organization. We call it a content services organization that's helping to manage the standards across a knowledge domain. So whether that is the structural standards, the semantic standards, it could be policy. I'm absolutely amazed at how much policy ends up expressing itself in semantics, and accessibility, quality. All of these things really need to be managed between strategy, engineering, and operations functions within a CSO, content services organization. So semantic standards, we believe, need to have some central authority with an ability to facilitate those standards, but not always impose, but also listen. The most important thing, all semantic systems will fail without listening.
Excellent. That's a good place for us to stop for just a second.
Yeah.
We are almost at the half-hour point, and to the audience members who thought the show would last 30 minutes, it appears we could go over a little bit in time. But if you've got a commitment and it means you have to, duck out of here and go do something else, don't worry. You can come back and watch the recording later. Just use the same URL, copy it out of your web browser. You can return back to here when you're finished with your next meeting and catch up and watch the rest of the recording. So, Cruce, will you stay for a few more minutes and tackle these extra questions that we have for you?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. So the thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned that developing a semantic system is a good first step, right, toward other things that you might want to do. Could you talk about the relationship between investing in semantics and what you get out of it, especially the knowledge graph, which seems to be a really hot topic right now and important in so many ways?
Well, yeah, I mean, defining semantics, I mean, even starting with a basic taxonomy is a really, really good first step on the way to defining more advanced forms of semantic interactions. When you start to map the meaning between terms, and then you start putting verbs on the meaning, like on the connections, it starts to become a knowledge graph. So really understanding the territory of a knowledge domain really just starts with identifying what's in it. And then once we understand what's in it, we can put it into an organizational structure, taxonomy. Multiple taxonomies together with interactions starts to become more and more ontological, more and more dimensional. So that word ontology gets thrown around, and really it's just a 3D version of a two-dimensional knowledge.
Descriptor is, the ontology helps us frame where that thing belongs, or the person, or whatever it is that we're talking about, and it gives us more power to be able to do things with that.
Right, and the power comes in AI inferencing and all kinds of advanced stuff that you can do on top of really well-structured knowledge graphs. But it all ultimately starts with just real basic stuff that even authors can do, which is just identifying what the meaning of a given content set is, whether it's an article or a paragraph or any part of it, and identifying who it's for and why it's useful. And the authoring process too, frankly.
I'll give you a quick example just to give our readers some context. So the Content Wrangler publishes some books with XML Press, a company specialized in making books for technical communicators and other knowledge workers. And we have a series of books called The Language Of, in which we invite 52 individual people who are experts in one topic to write about that topic in a short form. And everybody writes in the same way, the same length, everybody gets the same amount of coverage. And all that content together in a book is nice, but we thought, well, what if we put that content on the web? What if we were to mark up the nouns? What if we were to declare the people who are the experts and the topic that they're talking about and the places that they mention and the other people that they mention and mark them up with schema.org markup? Would we, in effect, make Google see our site as a authoritative place and get more traffic? And the answer was, after we put all that content into the Content Wrangler website and then added the semantics, all of a sudden our domestic natural organic traffic started going up, and Google was rewarding us with links. Like when people would search for a term that was defined by one of our authors in the books, they would, instead of sending them to Wikipedia, they would send them to our site if there wasn't a bigger site that had more authority than the Content Wrangler. Is that a good example of just kind of the basic use of it?
Perfect. Perfect. It's perfect. Because what you took was a latent set of knowledge that when you applied semantics, suddenly people could find it, and it became more valuable to the viewers and to the content wranglers and organization. It's all because content is only useful. It's only generating value when it moves, when it gets consumed. Yeah. And semantics facilitates consumption. So the why is because it makes everything more relevant and everything get consumed more and adds tons more value to the investment we're already putting into knowledge assets. So create a semantic layer on top of it, and we get the goodie out of that content because it's already there. We're already doing it. We're already generating meaning. We just need to make it explicit.
Chris,
and we need to have a process for managing that.
Megan has a follow-up question to take us down the rest of the program to get us to the end. But I wanted to ask a question of a viewer who said, could Cruce please repeat the last statement he made? All systems will fail without blank.
Yeah, all without so all semantic systems ultimately require listening. And what I mean by listening is that it's not enough to have a governing organization say, verily, verily, everybody he see here, this is our semantic system, and it shall be, because what ends up happening is people get like, I can't change it. It's this thing. But the reality is meaning is constantly evolving, and it evolves at the edge. It evolves with the authors. It evolves with the people that are interacting with customers. They have to be able to influence full cycle what's happening with the semantic definitions. So they need to be able to suggest new terms, suggest new thesaurus associations between terms. They need to be a contributor to the semantic process. So we believe that if you just hire somebody to go build a taxonomy, you're basically maybe 10% of the way there. You've got to take it the step of operationalizing it, and operationalizing it involves listening. And so we didn't know we were going to get into the operations business. It's just that we can't get any of this stuff to work without patterns and processes around the actual artifacts.
Scale, right? We really need this today in order to do things at the volume and velocity and scale that we are required to.
Exactly. There's just so much changing so quickly. Only patterns really end up facilitating the outcomes we're looking for. Sure. Semantic patterns are highly powerful, and it's a good place to invest. Organizational patterns, another high leverage place. Structural patterns, another one. And this is something that everybody can do. Every department level, even individuals, they can figure out the patterns in their own workday, their own authoring process, and start working with the patterns, not just the output, right? And so that's really the shift. One of the big shifts as we move towards intelligence that I'm seeing is we're moving our way of thinking towards pattern-based interoperability that creates coherence between content sets naturally, not something that has to be forced or imposed by standards that are ossified and or ignored. And so, we're having to embrace this kind of pattern-based thinking because we're never going to be able to get a hold of and throw enough people at the complexity at the edges.
Yeah, Megan, this sounds like perfect segue to our favorite topic, which we've been discussing during every show, and people who've been following our show know it's usually customer experience, but it's usually customer experience because we're talking about how to personalize the content and make it really valuable to the person who's consuming it. Megan, I know you had a question about personalization.
Yeah, so I love that we've said a couple things. One is that search is not magic. I just had a user group with a bunch of users at Zoomin about that very topic. Search is not magic. Taxonomy creation is not done like that. There's no easy button, right? You have to kind of go through the journey and do it. At the same time, personalization is one of those things where people think, oh, well, I'll just get a tool and it'll be personalized, or we'll use big data. And now with all the compliance laws, we don't get to use big data as much, right? And so the idea of semantics and how it impacts personalization in a system like ours, where we're taking in authenticated users and we understand various, basic information about them, to be able to personalize content to them is really important. Are you actually seeing semantics being used to sort of play out this idea of personalization in at scale?
Yeah, it's really I think the path to personalization at scale is only possible through semantics. It's otherwise it's basically the situation where you look behind the curtain and it's all manual. Like, you think it's magic, but it's just a bunch of manual things happening, right? And that's the same thing, right? Like most real successful personalization campaigns are just a ton of people putting lots and lots of pages up. And we've seen clients throw literally hundreds of people at creating multiple variants of content for multiple markets in multiple languages, and then basically just kind of letting it atrophy until somebody complains about it, and then they fix it. So so it's not sustainable, and it's really only through getting customer context data together with the semantically annotated content that personalization happens. It's a long journey, and that's why I think people are giving up, because there's a lot of people who've basically cut personalization budgets because, right. And we don't even use the word personalization too much anymore, because it really does evoke like the sense that it's a feature. Yeah. But it's not a feature. It's an effect. And it's an effect of the intelligence of the systems. And we have to invest in basically the systemic shift that needs to happen in the knowledge sets.
Well, we can describe it differently too. We don't have to say personalization. We can say, in order to facilitate the delivery of individualized experience, right? That's just for the person that you're trying to speak to. And right. I think if you say that, you get rid of any of the negative connotations that may come along with personalization, like it's so hard. Because I've seen people try to tackle personalization and they start down that what could we do path, and then all of a sudden they're doing all these extra things that aren't really solving the main problem that people have, which is, I can't find the right information on your website.
Yeah.
We could do simple things to help individualize the experience. And I think Zoomin and companies that are trying to solve this problem are on the tip of the iceberg of what's possible.
Yeah, and they're all forward-leaning. Vendors like Zoomin are all looking at the invisible world that happens around content, not just the content itself. So really every forward-thinking vendor is thinking portability and sort of service orientation, so APIs, but they're also thinking in terms of the invisible. In fact, we have a show releasing. In fact, the first one is coming out today, called The Invisible World of Content. It's a YouTube series, and that's what it's about. It's all this invisible stuff that happens around the words and pictures that makes it accessible to humans and machines in new ways, at new scales, with new kinds of interactions. Because we're moving from chunky to modular. We're moving from irrelevant and I have to sift through stuff to go find my answer to the right answer comes to me, right? At the right time. It kind of almost magically knows what I need, right? And we've all seen advertising that's like, how did that know? But it's pulling semantic data together with contextualized content. And so we just in the enterprise, we're making that move towards intelligence, and it's a process. And so that's why we created this show, is to kind of help other people know about the process. So it's not just us in the content community trying to kind of carry the educational load for the rest of the enterprise.
Our viewers learn about your show at simpleA.com.
Yeah, it's on simpleA.com, and then you join our Twitter feed or whatever. It'll have the YouTube links and all of that there. So.
Great. So thanks for sharing.
Sounds like an awesome show. Scott and I are going to want to come on.
Yeah, it's great.
We'll do that.
Take a look at it.
I just wanted to point out. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there are some things that tools like Zoom do easily, right? Like we understand product names and you put that into your metadata. We understand roles. We understand sort of the basics of users, but this semantic layer is super, super, super important in really diving deeper into the context that the simple, like you're not going to get just based on what a user logs in as, right? So if a user logs in, we know that they're a developer and that they're on this version of the product, and that stuff's easy for us, right? It might not be so easy for other tools, but certainly that's easy for us. But we're talking about a much, much deeper thing, and I can't iterate enough how important this is. As I do, that in my past experience at a massive organization, working through a taxonomy is a big, big deal. And it makes such a difference. And it's complex and it's messy. And you guys have kind of gotten down how to sort of sort through that. So
yeah, that's good. And Cruce and Megan, for the remaining time, we only have a couple minutes. Could we tackle these extra questions? I'll ask the first one, and Megan, if you could ask the second one, that'd be great, and then we'll close out the show. One viewer asked, should owners or custodians of the term base be the custodians of the semantic definitions?
Yeah. So the term base, it becomes an almost indispensable stakeholder and contributor to a semantic team.
Okay.
We usually believe that somebody needs to be deputized, the sort of owner of the semantic model itself. So the core semantic model has an owner, and that owner usually has stakeholders that are very close and are kind of form a little bit of a committee, right? So as requests kind of come in, they're able to then sort through and figure out what happens to the canonical one in a way that's as balanced and as transparent for the rest of the community as possible. So the term-based owner can either become that person, we've seen that happen,
yeah,
or they can become an advocate for the term base that is a very important stakeholder within that steering group. So the fact that question is even asked is a highly mature question, because most organizations have terminology management happening usually in localization. If it's happening, it's happening in localization teams, and nobody else knows about it.
Right.
It's not like marketing doesn't know about it, like support, knowledge management. And I'm like, why? How that will never cease to amaze me. But that's why we have to build team. It's teamwork. It's teamwork, guys. We have to have teamwork.
Okay. One more question.
Yeah, somewhat related, but a little bit different. Someone says, I guess what makes semantics so powerful in context of this talk is metadata, then talks about all of these roles we have that are specific to managing data scientists, data structure people, but we don't have enough in metadata. So they're wondering if metadata is actually being undervalued in the world, and that maybe we should have specialized roles like metadata strategist.
Wow,
what do you think of that?
That's a brilliant question.
A good friend of mine, Aaron, believes we should throw the word metadata out completely. And I understand where he's coming from. So it's data, right? And I think there's I'm not going to take that stance because we use metadata terminology all the time still, but because it's a very big reality in enterprise software. But really, it's either computer-oriented stuff or it's human-oriented. A metadata field could become an explicitly published thing for humans. It could be both. So we actually look at it as sort of on, off, or both. When you're assigning a data field, like, is it metadata? Is it explicit, or is it both? On, off, or both? So I think it's really important to understand the shades of gray and not kind of get into other silos. When we use the word metadata, it kind of tends to silo out the use of those fields.
Perfect. I want to segue just really quickly and tell the audience I fibbed. That was not the last question, because this question is exactly what you just said. Okay. So this particular person said, heard you say silos, I think. How can a content person facilitate or encourage this desilification, breaking down of the silos, or unifying them, or whatever we decide is the strategy? What advice could you give?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. So, I mean, it is all teamwork. I could give a much longer answer to this, but for brevity, it's really build conversations and bring data. So identify the issue in the issues and the challenges and the opportunities in as data-driven a way as possible. That requires a little bit of introspection and some noodling, and then bring that into conversation. And those conversations can be formal, like, hey, can we get together a committee meeting about the state of content between a few different groups?
Oh yeah,
let's talk about this. Or it could be like, you could be, well, I guess nowadays we don't go to the lunchroom and go, bring conversations, but we can still invite colleague-based informal dialogue.
You can still Zoom with other people.
I want to add something. I did a talk once that actually scientifically proved that silos are actually beneficial to change management across the entire organization, and that the way you should handle them is by setting the appropriate size bridges in between. You don't want it too siloed, but you don't want it unsiloed either. And in that case, the content, the semantic model that you're talking about kind of becomes the bridge between the silos that allows those silos to operate independently enough, but also come together to have the right results.
And I think that's going to have to be the last word until we do a show on silos, which I'm sure is happening in the near future.
Perfect. Perfect. That's exactly right. It's a bridge.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Cruce, and sharing us all of the good nuggets that you had about semantics. I know that it's a great big topic. We could probably spend a lot of time on it, and Megan and I could ask you 100 more questions, but we won't today, but we'll have you back in the future. So thanks for being a guest on our show, and thanks to the audience for being here as well.
And give us a rating. Give us a rating. Cruce wants a 5, but we want an honest rating. Whatever you think, we want to know how we did. So give us some feedback on how we do better.
Rate this underneath your webinar viewing panel to give a 1 through 5 star rating in case you've never done it before, and you can leave a comment for Cruce if you'd like about today's show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to be on the lookout for our next webinar invitation. The Content Advantage show takes place every 2 weeks on Tuesday, and the Tuesday, February the 2nd, is going to be a show you don't want to miss. We're going to chat with John Kearney, a cybersecurity and technical writing expert, who will share lessons he learned teaching cybersecurity practitioners how to make their communication accessible to others. Until we see you again, be safe, be well, and keep doing good work.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.